Okay, so we have the core setup of our blast done, and now we're gonna just focus on making this whole thing look much better. So first, I wanna make sure that it's sitting nicely on the floor. So let's just move this right on top of the floor. Next, we can prepare the lighting a little bit. It's gonna look much better if it's at nighttime. So create lights. Let's make a rectangular light. Let's not forget to enable the volumetric shadows. Just always do that right away. So just type in cast and say and cast volumetric shadows over here. And we can just delete the directional light altogether. And you can see how the brightness is changing. That's because of the auto exposure. And I personally don't like it because I just want to have control over the lighting instead of it changing on its own. So what you can do is go under Edit, Project Settings, and just search for auto exposure. Here we go. And just turn off the auto exposure. So now it gets much darker, but at least you're in control. So you know that it's not gonna change on its own. And we can just boost the intensity of this rectangular light. And you can just increase the attenuation radius so that it lights up a larger area, just like this. That's good enough for now. And let's go back to our Niagara system over here. So first, I don't want the smoke to be rising up. I want it to stick to the floor. So emitter summary, simulation, and like we learned, buoyancy is what controls whether the smoke goes up or down. So density buoyancy, I'll just set to a positive value, so maybe 0.5. And now it'll be sticking to the floor. It's actually falling down very subtly, which is perfect. Next, I think the shockwave could have more energy, so we need to give it more velocity. So for the particles, add velocity, the minimum, let's try and make that 800 and the maximum maybe 1200. Nice, now we're starting to get a much cooler shockwave. Let's shorten this loop a little bit. Now there are some issues right now because the particles are moving so fast, so there's some obvious steppiness as the smoke simulation is not really able to catch up to those fast particles. You get those steps in between the gaps in the smoke. So the way to fix that a little bit is to go under emitter, simulation, and let's increase the pressure solve iterations again, double it to 12. But most importantly, we can go under the source, and here we need to enable use streaking. The streaking options inserts copies along the velocity, effectively creating a smoother trail. Long story short, if you just enable this, it should get rid of some of those steppiness issues for you. So let's see what we get. And it's definitely better. It's not great, but it's better than it was before. Next up, the smoke is getting killed when it touches the floor. So under collisions, we can uncheck open boundary -Z. So again, the floor is solid. Nice. I also think the grid needs to be wider. So simulation on the y-axis, let's make it 1000. So at this point, let's introduce fire into the mix. So we can go to simulation temperature, enable that. And by default, the temperature is way too strong, as you'll see. It's basically just this extremely bright white ball. So the way to fix that is to emit less temperature. So we can go to the set fluid attributes. We haven't gone over this module yet. This is where you tell Niagara how much smoke and fire you want the particles to contribute into the simulation right now, right? So I'm basically telling Niagara, hey, I want you, for each particle, I want you to generate a density of 1 and a temperature of 1 at this velocity scale. So if I want to emit less temperature out of the particles, I'll just set this to 0.1 maybe. Maybe that's too little, so 0.2. Okay, that's starting to look nicer. And if I want less smoke, I'll just lower the density to maybe 0.4. Less smoke means that more of the temperature is now exposed, right? So the temperature looks brighter, so it's a constant back and forth. So I'll just lower the temperature to maybe 0.1. Now, one thing that you'll notice is that the smoke kind of slows down pretty fast. I would like it to keep going. In other words, I would like the smoke to have more velocity given from the particles. That's what the velocity scale is for. So watch, as I set this to 3, which is way too much, but basically now the smoke is given a lot more velocity from the particles and it shoots up much further. I wouldn't go too high with this. Maybe let's do 1.5, and that's gonna give the shockwave just a bit more energy going forward. Now, one more thing that I don't like is I feel like the fire and the smoke dissipate way too fast. So we've learned how to do this in video 2. So just to recap, emitter summary, this is where our dissipation settings are. So if I want the smoke to not dissipate as fast, I can lower the dissipation rate to maybe just 0.1. And same thing for the temperature, I'll just set it to maybe 0.4, even more, so 0.1. And now the temperature, the flames, you can see the flames are staying alive for a lot longer. Now to produce even more fire, I think we just need more particles. So spawn burst instantaneous. Let's give burst to 1500 particles. And we're getting a much fuller, nicer shockwave this way. And I probably wouldn't mind a bit more temperature. So instead of 0.1, let's try 0.15. Nice. So now I'm starting to get some very beautiful lingering flames. If we look at it from this way, we're getting close to that trailer result. Now I think that the velocity of the particles is a bit too random. Lower the randomness a bit, meaning I'm just gonna set this to maybe 900 and this to 1100. Nice. And let's increase the resolution of the simulation to get a lot more details. So emitter summary and resolution max axis, let's do 400. Yeah, so this is not looking good, but it's important for you to see that once you change the resolution of the simulation, it will change the behavior too, because there's just so many more voxels for the simulation to work with. So if I set this to 300, that still looks pretty good. 350 starts to look pretty bad. 400 looks bad. So let's see if changing the velocity scale changes things. Yeah, so it just doesn't like the velocity scale being too high. So I think I'll just set this to maybe 1.2. Yeah, 1.2 seems to work. It's a bit slower to simulate. So final decision, I think I'll do 350 for the resolution here. All right, so a few more tweaks. It's really just, having fun and seeing what looks good to you. I think we could have even more smoke, so I'll increase the density again to maybe 0.8. And let's give it even more particles initially, so 5000 for the spawn burst instantaneous. Cool, so I'm gonna call this good. Let's save our work. And this is what it looks like in the scene. You can see it just ends up looking way better with that volumetric lighting. Now, a few more fixes. The temperature is rising up still too much. And I think the temperature is way too bright overall. So you always have to check what it looks like in your scene, even though it looks good in this particular viewport. So I'll just set the temperature to 0.1 and the temperature buoyancy, let's set that to 0 so that it doesn't rise up as much. Let's also change the color of the flame. So in the trailer, I did blue. So again, render. We can change the smoke color to be like a dark blue, maybe like almost black blue. For the temperature, meaning the flames, let's change it from black body to a curve. And I'll just change the colors here to be a nice saturated blue. Maybe do like a dark blue and a light blue. See what that looks like. Say okay and see what that looks like in our scene. Let's check it from this angle. Okay, I would say that's almost identical to what I had in the trailer at this point. Maybe still just a touch too bright in those first few frames. So maybe just change the temperature here to 0.05 maybe. Darken the blue color a bit more. Just drag it into the black area over here. And let's auto activate. And here we go. That's our shockwave. So you know, just to make it a little bit better, you can just give it that darker floor like what we had before. You can also make it collide with the other walls if you wanted to. So collisions, and we can make it collide. This would be the X plus. So X plus uncheck, and it should collide with this left wall as well when it hits it. Here's our energy shockwave. So this will be our final result for this lesson. And in the next one, I will show you the alternative version with just turning this into a green flamethrower and adding collisions with like an invisible wall to make it look like they're fighting. So I'll see you in the next one.